It's not the dramatic failure. It's not the catastrophic choice that anyone looking from the outside could have flagged immediately. Most people don't mess up their life in one visible dramatic moment. They do it slowly, quietly, across a long stretch of seemingly reasonable decisions, each one defensible on its own, each one contributing to an outcome nobody planned. And the reason it's so hard to catch is that it doesn't feel like error while it's happening. It feels like doing what you're supposed to do, being responsible, being realistic, managing your expectations, surviving the current season before you think about what comes next. Welcome to the Creator's Mind. Richter is going to show you this specific place, not a metaphor, a specific pattern where this happens for most people. Subscribe before this ends if you're not already here. The core of it is this. Most people mess up their life not by doing wrong things, but by doing adequate things for so long that doing right things starts to feel unnecessary. The threshold for what counts as acceptable gradually shifts downward. The ambition that was alive at 20 becomes the ambition that was adjusted at 23 and managed at 26 and mostly not mentioned by 30. Not because life defeated them, because the slow accumulation of adequate decisions trained them out of the expectation that more was possible. This is where it actually happens, not in one place, in one recurring pattern that shows up at different coordinates across the years. The first coordinate, the moment you decide that understanding yourself is a luxury you'll get to eventually. It doesn't present as a decision, you're just busy. There are things to handle, things to get through, external pressure to navigate. In the internal work, the examination of what you actually want, why you respond the way you do, what you're building toward, and why, that gets deferred indefinitely. And here's what the deferral costs. Every major decision you make without self-knowledge is made by someone operating partly blind. The choices compound, and eventually you look at the life you've constructed and feel a vague, unnameable dissatisfaction, not because it's bad, but because you're not sure you ever actually chose it. The second coordinate, the moment you accept an environment that consistently tells you you're smaller than you are, not with cruelty, with low expectations, with systems that don't require much from you, with relationships where your presence is needed but your growth is irrelevant. You adapt to the ceiling of the room. That adaptation is not visible from the inside. You don't feel yourself shrinking. You feel yourself being realistic. The third coordinate, the moment you stop treating failure as data and start treating it as identity. Something doesn't work, a project, a relationship, a direction you chose, and instead of disaggregating it, looking at what specifically went wrong and what can be adjusted, you absorb it globally. It becomes evidence of something about you, your capability, your worth, your right to try again. And that evidence accumulates. Each failure adds another data point to the case you're building against yourself, until the case is robust enough that you stop trying things that might fail, which is to say, things that might be real. The fourth coordinate, the moment you confuse movement with progress. You're doing things, you're busy, you're not idle, and the activity creates a sensation of forward motion that you don't examine too closely because the examination might reveal that the motion is lateral or circular, that the effort is enormous and the direction is unclear, and the distance traveled toward anything you actually want is much smaller than the energy invested suggests it should be. Busyness is not a strategy. It's one of the most effective forms of avoidance available because it produces guilt-free stagnation. This is the territory the Creator's mind was built to illuminate, the distinction between a life that looks active and a life that is actually moving, between the motion you can report and the progress you can measure. The fifth coordinate, the moment you let a relationship, romantic, familial, social, become the primary constraint on who you're allowed to become. Not consciously, nobody agrees to that, but certain relationships carry an implicit contract. Stay legible, stay predictable, don't change in ways that make the other person recalibrate. And if you're in that relationship long enough, the contract becomes ambient. You stop proposing versions of yourself that the relationship hasn't seen before. You self-edit before you even get to the conversation. And gradually, the person you're becoming gets narrower, not because the relationship is abusive, but because it's static. And a static relationship and a dynamic life is always a compromise. The question is, who's paying it? The sixth coordinate. The moment you let someone else's definition of success become the benchmark for yours. This one is almost invisible because it arrives through people you respect: parents, mentors, culture, the ambient noise of social comparison. And it's presented not as external imposition, but as obvious truth. This is what success looks like. This is the timeline it follows. This is how you know you've made it. And you absorb it. And you start measuring yourself against a ruler you didn't make and finding yourself insufficient. Not because you are, because the ruler is wrong, because it was built for a different person's life, and you've been applying it to yours. The seventh coordinate. The moment you give up on the version of yourself that scared you a little. Not the reckless one, the real one. The one with actual opinions, actual direction, the willingness to be misunderstood in the service of being genuine. At some point, that version felt too risky, too exposed, too likely to be rejected or criticized or simply unsupported by the people whose opinion you needed. So you softened it, made it more palatable, more agreeable, and the version you kept was safer and smaller and easier to maintain in company. And you've been maintaining it ever since. The eighth coordinate, the one that underlies all the others. The moment you stopped believing your life was actually yours to author. Not in some grand philosophical sense, in the practical, daily sense of feeling like you have real agency over the direction things go. This belief erodes gradually through accumulated experiences of trying and not getting, wanting and not having, expecting and being disappointed. And eventually the belief recedes below the threshold of awareness. You stop framing things as choices. You start framing them as circumstances. And a person who is living in circumstances rather than choices is not a person who is building anything. They are a person who is being built by whatever is around them. The mess doesn't happen in one moment. It happens in the accumulation of moments where you were present but not attending, where you were moving but not directing, where you were living but not choosing. Every one of those moments is still available to you. Right now is one of them. Press like if this reached the right place. Subscribe to The Creator's Mind. The next video is already on your screen. Richter will be there.